Is this thing working? I swear this is episode 142 and I still just don't know if it's going to work on any given occasion. Okay, let's wait for the audio to catch up. Good morning, Ted Johnston, and good morning, Mo. Buenos dias. Cheers. Buen provecho. Okay, I think we have audio. Good evening and welcome. Come on in. I have some toast here that I may try to eat because, yeah, Fridays, it's nonstop, 6:30 a.m. when I get up until get the kids to school, 8:30 a.m. to start this, and then I've stacked an entire morning of calls after this. So let's get moving. Good morning, buenos dias. And Karen's expression says it all. Yes, I forget her name. Rashida Jones. She's awesome. She is also in Parks and Recreation, which I'm rewatching now. She's in The Office, a limited role in The Office, but she is awesome. So someone, JXR Jen asks, do you have any plans on resuming learning BC Dev from scratch playlist? I've contemplated not resuming it, but re-recording it, doing it over again, because it's been a couple years, with version 2 of Christoph's AL for Beginners workbook. But time, priorities, everything else, and I just don't know how much value I'm adding, so I'm contemplating it. I am training a junior dev right now from scratch, and based on that experience, someone who has very little development background or software programming experience, I'm thinking of trying something different. And so I may just do my own little from scratch series that is even more basic than the AL for Beginners workbook based on that. So anyway, moving on, send a comment, question, such as what you just heard on Twitter, YouTube, or Twitch. And I should see it. All of these comments appear to be on YouTube, interestingly. Okay, and the weekend, I believe, it's all blur. We got back from San Antonio from the conference. Everyone was tired. Several people got the famous, infamous C virus and were sick. Amazingly, I somehow escaped getting the bug. And felt okay this weekend. So I actually took a nap and enjoyed the weekend. And I watched what has to be one of the strangest movies ever made. And I've seen it before. And for some reason, I was like, oh, I want to rewatch that. And it popped up in one of my feeds as for free. But then it was also, I think, on Amazon Prime. So I was able to watch the whole thing. And it is truly bizarre. Like, the mental state of the person who wrote that script, very disturbing. Like, how did they come up with this stuff? And, you know, like him killing a panda and wearing it in the jungle, and then the whole Tom Cruise character. Absolutely baffling. Even the prosthetic hands, where his fingers look all thick and furry. Just truly bizarre, like, where they went with that movie. So, yeah, yes, Ted says could never be made today. Yes, along with Blues Brothers, along with Blazing Saddles, along with History of the World, along with but it doesn't seem that old. I don't know what year it was, but just absolutely wild, weird movie. But semi-entertaining, even, like, it's so silly. But anyway. Okay, so JXR Jen asks, what do you think would be the next step for me to take after finishing that playlist? That's a great question. Once you get past the basics of just the syntax of AL, it explodes in this giant universe of AL development with APIs, report extensions, job queues, code units, actions, and an actual programming logic, not just slapping up a page and creating some fields. Like, it starts to get a little more complex. And so you need to have a little more composed lessons. I don't remember the final steps of AL for Beginners workbook, but it's a great question. I am working on an answer. And with the junior developer we're training in Berlin, Franklin, he's done page extensions. He did that in a couple days. So boom, he's ready to go. So now we're trying to figure out what's next and coming up with practical projects. So I'll try to cobble those together, put those in PowerPoint, and maybe I'll do a session. Because we have a full-time developer now, I am super rusty. I wouldn't even say rusty. I'm incompetent on AL. Like, I can't do a complex AL project just because I don't write the code anymore. But Ted says, Kenny's AL Go playlist. Okay, I haven't watched that. So Kenny P with Microsoft apparently has a AL Go playlist on YouTube. But I think what I found is once you get past some of the very basics like my series or AL for Beginners workbook or others, you then have this vast array of these very small topics. It's like, oh, go watch Eric Hogard's YouTube playlist. Well, Eric has 27,000 videos. So it's like, you're sitting there doing these 15-minute exercises. And so it's not so much what Brad Prendergast would call a learning path. It's like this random buffet with dishes all over the place. And you're like, what am I supposed to do next? So that's a little bit of a challenge. Is there's lots of resources, lots of stuff, but it's not necessarily prioritized or listed chronologically in a sequence that you're going to follow to learn progressively. So that is the challenge with BC Learning, with lots of learning, tons of videos, but they're kind of all over the place, kind of like, this right here. So weekly projects, proyectos semanales, lots of BC report layouts. Now that I have gathered the tribe of interns in Berlin, El Salvador, we are getting Tanya and Alyssa to hand over report layout modifications just to give them practice and learning, and they're just coming fast and like whizzing by. And so David and Jocelyn have been working on them. We got checks, we got reports, we have statements, we have POs. Those are the top 4, I think, and banging those out. And Jocelyn's working on a different project, so now most of them are going to David. So anyway, it's been interesting. Housekeeping, managing report files. Given all of these report layouts, they're whizzing back and forth. Support tickets, emails, Teams, whatever. I'm like, whoa. Hold up. We need to stop. We need to fix the housekeeping. So my developer and I have been very good with this. When we see a problem, organizational, a bug, a pipeline issue, whatever, we're just like, stop. Everything comes to a complete stop until we fix the housekeeping that led to that issue, or that will allow us to better handle that issue. So when our pipeline fails, we're like, whoa, everything stops until we figure out why that pipeline on next minor and next major is failing. So I'm seeing it right away. Managing report files. This is a mess. We need a system to organize it. So we're experimenting with a OneDrive share folder. Our ERP Center of Excellence interns drop the file. We have a specific naming convention for the report layouts. They drop the file into a OneDrive share. Ronald created a flow that detects that and pushes it over to our application consulting side, puts it in their SharePoint in a specific folder, just like what we do with our PTEs. So when our build pipelines and release pipelines run, drops it in I think it's Azure Blob Storage in that particular case. And then a flow runs, drops it into SharePoint, sends out an email notification so that everyone knows, hey, we have a new release of this PTE. Here's the version number. You're good to go to test. We're going to do the same thing with report files. So there's no like email, no Teams, no pushing this stuff. You drop it in the folder it should be in. Flow pushes it over to SharePoint. There you go, notification goes out. So fully automated, fully organized, basically a practice, a habit of just being fully organized from the beginning. So we're not dealing with this back and forth, where's the file, what version do we have? That has led to the question of organizational file storage. we're testing on a shared drive on my Office 365 or whatever it's called these days, my OneDrive account. But every time a file is touched, moved, whatever, I'm getting an email notification. I'm like, whoa, what is going on? I could probably turn it off, but I think it's a sign that we need a centralized organizational file storage solution that is not tied to my personal account. And I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if that's SharePoint versus OneDrive. Don't know. It seems like a simple, obvious question, but like, I just don't know the answer. So Ronald and David are looking into that. Where is a central repository where everyone can just drop a file? It's not owned by any one person. And then the flow can kick off to move files to SharePoint, send notifications, whatever. And we've had a couple of Dynamics GP partner strategy discussions lately, and they continue this week. You may have heard that Microsoft finally announced end of formal support for Dynamics GP, and I think it's 2029, if I'm not mistaken, which that's 5 more years, plus customers can continue to use it as long as they're not using payroll, I think. Maybe sales tax, but I think primarily payroll is the big one that would force you to move off once support ends. But other customers that don't use payroll, in theory, they could continue to use it for 10 more years. So we're talking with them, and they're asking the question, well, I don't want to move to BC or Acumatica or NetSuite or Sage or whatever, Intact. What do I tell my BC customers who want a plan or want a transition process or whatever? So we're working with a couple of these GP partners to help them out. Show them BC, show them what a GP to BC migration looks like for customers where that is a possible option and BC is a good potential option. Happy to demo and help with that transition and work with that partner. For customers where it's not a good fit for whatever reason, it's like, hey, let's just rule out BC for these reasons early so you don't waste the customer's time. So we're kind of exploring that with 2 different partners and making ourselves available. And BC procedure documentation project. This is the very unusual project, relatively unusual for us, where we're helping a partner implement BC, and this partner, I think, is not a BC partner typically. So we're providing all the BC services, but they are used to doing an enterprise implementation. And by enterprise, I mean every single task, process, click, procedure, validation, you name it, is fully documented and scripted to the T, click, 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 before the customer does any testing. Very unusual for us. Like, I can kind of theoretically understand it in the F&O realm. And so that's what the partner is demanding the customer and we do. It's like, fine. So this is hours and hours and hours of documentation down to click here, screenshot, click there, screenshot, enter this in that field, screenshot, literally step-by-step instructions, full procedure guide. And what's really odd to me is they're using DevOps for this. Like, it wouldn't have been my choice, but okay. And I don't know what the actual number, I think it's somewhere north of 200 hours on this project already. The customer has never seen Business Central. They haven't touched Business Central. So we're just like, okay, you're the boss. We'll do what you say, but heads up, you might want to show your customers the product at some point before you get to 1,000 hours on a BC project. So it very bizarre, very unusual. We have customers say, you need to implement BC for us in 60 hours. Boom. We need to go live in 4 weeks. This is not that project. So very unusual. So anyway, we pulled Jocelyn off of report layouts, and this is right up her alley. She is documenting these procedures to the hilt. And she's thrilled. She's like, yes, I get to learn all this stuff. So it's fantastic. She gets to learn every single option, feature, field, button click, page, you name it, for every single one of these business processes. And she is documenting every single thing, sentence, explanation, screenshot. over and over and over, hundreds of these scripts. So fascinating project, one might say. So it's a busy week. Monday, lunes, mentioned organizing report layouts. So Ronald created a prototype from our dev OneDrive where we have the report layouts are going to get dropped. Power Automate pushes to consulting SharePoint. So that just got set up. We've done a few initial tests other than the annoying notifications on my side because it's my OneDrive share. Seems to work in concept. So we got the prototype working. And then I had a GP support call, the first of a couple, as I'll follow up. I do not miss on-prem. On-prem ERP, I know the hardcore GP partners are like, oh, it's fine. No, it's not fine. It is not fine. The state of on-prem is a disaster. Why? Because I had a call with the partner who didn't know what was going on with their customers' on-prem environment. It was a mess. Steve, why doesn't your product work? Why is it getting errors? Because there are literally no files in this application directory. Dynamics GP was uninstalled, and our product relies upon GP. Oh, okay, that makes sense. So we go on hunting around and we find a file, a folder, GP 2018_new. What does that mean? No idea. So we point it towards that. We kind of get it working. More to come. So it's absolute mess. No one knows what's going on. Half the time I have a call and I'm like, what server is this on? They don't know. They're going hunting around. So on-prem is a mess for vast majority of customers. If they even have IT, many of our customers do not have internal IT, so they rely exclusively on consultants or partners. If they have IT, that IT person has 1,000 other things going on. They do not know ERP. The last thing they want to do is go poking around in configuration files in the ERP system. So on-prem, I'm sorry, it has many strikes against it. Time to move on. And you may recall, I think it was last week, I talked about critical services, maybe it was 2 weeks ago. And I talked about critical services in the context of like $1.3 billion company with 460,000 customers. Companies sign up with them thinking, oh, this is a big name brand. They don't look at the financials of that company that has never made a net profit or an operational profit, and they have a $1.1 billion deficit after 16 years. People are signing up left and right thinking, oh, I'll give them my money, outsource a critical business process to this company. Well, here you go. As if you needed another example, you may have heard of a company called Digital River. They are popular among small software providers who say, yeah, I want to sell my shareware or whatever. I don't want to deal with credit card processing and create a portal and blah, blah, blah. So they sign up for Digital River. And like many others in this space, Digital River, my understanding is they'll take your money and then they'll hold on to it for a while because they don't want to deal with chargebacks. So you get sales in June, you get paid out in July or August. There's a delay. But once you get the pipeline filled, you get these regular monthly payments and they deal with all this hassle for you. Great, right? Yeah, look, it even lists Xbox on there. Wow, they must be a big, good company. Until I saw a notification from a small software provider that I've purchased from, and they called it the DR meltdown. And the issue is that Digital River just stopped paying these software providers in July. They just stopped sending them payments, and the software providers are like, hey, what's going on? It's like radio silence, nothing. And someone filed a lawsuit, apparently, and the response is, oh, we have no legal obligation to pay you. That apparently is the formal legal response. And so for the past 3 months, we've had a complete halt in software sales, revenue payments, no support, no direct contact, only additional terms and conditions designed to delay resolution. So yeah, Digital River apparently changed their terms and conditions once some business deal or financing or restructuring or bankruptcy proceedings, I don't know what triggered it. And they said, yeah, we can delay payment additional 90 days or indefinitely or whatever. And we have no legal obligation to pay out the money that we owe you. So if you're signing up for these services, folks like read the fine print, investigate, because these small companies are not going to have revenue for 6 to 9 months as a result of this. They're going to have to move to different platforms. They've basically lost all that revenue. And if Digital River goes into bankruptcy proceedings, just say goodbye. You might get 10 cents on the dollar after hours and hours of fighting it. So be careful. Tuesday, martes, only 3 hours of team meetings and 1 hour of clase de español. And I think I already covered this, but had the GP partner strategy call. What should we tell GP customers? What do we offer them as alternatives to transition off a GP? And like, BC is an option. I'm not religious about it. There is NetSuite, there's Acumatica, there's Sage, there's Intact, there's whatever. Those are the names I know. There's some I've never heard of. But yeah, like if the partner wants to invest, great. If they don't want to invest, then they're relying upon, the promises or the claims that I make or a NetSuite partner makes or whatever. So they feel kind of obligated to take care of these customers and transition them, but not quite enough to invest fully in one of these other solutions and take it on as a new business. So features and functionality, it's not so obvious once you dig into it. It's like, oh, BC is fine. Well, not always. Features and functionality may not be a good fit, depending on, say, country, industry, particular modules they want to use. ISV solutions in BC are now, I think, doing fairly well. There are some things that just don't exist yet, but GP had the same issue. But if the GP customers had something for years, it may or may not be available in equivalent form in the BC space. And this is a big one, complex integrations. Like, it doesn't really matter, BC, NetSuite, whatever. You got to rewrite or dramatically refactor the customizations or the integrations. And, if you're used to hitting the SQL database directly, very efficient, very direct, as long as you know what you're doing, switching all those direct to SQL integrations over to an API or Power Automate or whatever you want to do for Business Central, not trivial. It's a lot of work, different fields, different mappings, different data sets. It's a big project. So yeah. And then finally, customizations. Largely have to rewrite those. A lot of work no matter which system you choose. So it's not just what is the successor to Dynamics GP. It's also the much bigger question of how do we deal with the migration of this customer to re-implement, re-architect, reconnect everything. Common story for those of you who have been around for a while. And high volume is another kicker. If it's just GL for users, usually not an issue. If you have 100 million, 500 million, $1 billion company, public company, credit card processing, tens of thousands of transactions a day, it gets kind of nerve-wracking, right? You can't, it's like rebuilding the airplane while it's flying type of thing. You can't just shut down business. So you got to build all of this stuff in parallel and then flip the switch at some point. So I mentioned this last week. Silvio Virlan has a book, Beyond the Ledgers, Data Insights with Business Central and AI. So head on over to leanpub.com and check it out, or svirlan.com. It's a good book, actually. Live. I forgot to grab it. So there you go. I got an autographed copy. Yeah, right there. So I met the author live in person. I actually presented with him at Summit Conference. So, yep, check it out. It's got some good recipes and some good lessons and examples. And for those of you who are already BC consultants and have worked with ad hoc analysis or analysis views or whatever it's called, it may be a little obvious, but there are some little nuggets that it's like, oh, I didn't even know it could do that. So yeah, check it out. Good gift for a customer as well. A new BC customer, and they're like, yeah, how do I slice and dice my data? I need these customer reports. Buy them the book and say, hey, check this out. Look at what you can do with Business Central right out of the box. And it includes discussion of ChatGPT and Copilot, I believe, and how you can use different AI analysis to produce the results you want, both within BC and exporting out into Excel and then transforming the data. So check that out. Wednesday, miércoles, AL Dev Lessons with Franklin. So Franklin is our trainee at ERP Center of Excellence in Berlin, El Salvador, who has never heard of Business Central, never heard of ERP, has taken a few introductory boot camps for programming like Java and Oracle, and doing a little bit of development there, but basically junior beginner learning to program candidate. And so we're starting from scratch. He is learning to use VS Code, AL language extension, for now just Waldo CRS language extension, and he is creating page extensions, customers, vendors, items, adding fields, table extensions, and his current lesson is to create brand new pages with custom tables from scratch. So he's slowly progressing, and he's at the stage where it's like, this is easy. I'm like, yes, at this point, it is easy. I agree. So he's doing really well, learning some projects. He still needs to learn all the fundamentals, like when do you use a code versus a text field? How do you do a lookup? How do you put things on a particular menu on the role center, right? All those little details, thousands of details, but he's doing pretty good. And then related to AL development, we have worked with a couple of third parties in the last few months where they have said, oh, we'll take care of this integration with Business Central. Business Central is APIs, or we see that it's not too hard to develop BC with AL extensions. Like, okay, and we're a little naive on the dangers of this. And that third party consulting firm, ISV partner, whoever on our project, like, okay, we're busy. Great. If you got it handled, go for it. They say AL development is easy, but then, Business Central is horrible. Once the consequence of their code kicks in and becomes fully evident to everyone, it's Business Central's fault. Always Business Central fault, never their fault. And yes, Business Central is horrible. Why does the performance suck? Why is it such garbage? Microsoft, why can't they get their act together? Well, after a little investigation, there's an argument where it's not our fault. It's like, really? Well, I'm pretty sure Business Central did not insert 460,000 records into this table on its own. I'm going to guess that was you. And these are orphaned records. And you notice the lower, second record is in the sandbox company or test company. 271,000 records got inserted there for testing. 462,000 records got inserted into the production company database. So this process via API started out at a couple seconds. It turned in less than 30 days, went from a couple seconds to over 10 minutes. Because of the thousands of inserts that were occurring to the aged report entity table due to a, mistake, bug, design issue, whatever, misunderstanding on an API. So, folks, we have a new rule, and that is when we have an ISV, consultant, partner, whoever says, oh, we're going to do this code, API call, whatever, we are going to have a new rule to say, no, not without code review, not without a design document. You're not going to just hack your way into Business Central and then we have to deal with the consequence. So now I have to gingerly walk into production and delete nearly 500,000 records out of this table. And not pretty, folks. So yeah. That's what can happen when someone says AL development is easy and they start pushing to prod. Which gets to a related note. BC performance. I have many thoughts on this and have some ambivalence. So that last developer said, why does Business Central suck? Why is it so bad? How come performance is so poor? And it turned out we found the cause, and it was due to bad AL code. So there is a YouTube video here on the Business Central channel, Microsoft 365 Business Central something something YouTube channel, with Bardur Knudsen and Vincent Nicholas, principal software engineer and chief architect at Microsoft. And I got them out of order. I apologize. Sorry, let me just try to fix that. And animations and move later. And there we go. Okay, so the series is called Under the Hood, presented by Vincent Nicholas, and it is on the main Dynamics 365 YouTube channel, but only certain episodes on that channel are Under the Hood. And Vincent speaks with Bardur about Business Central performance and how to make your AL code super fast. And one of the statements early on he explains is how long it takes for, say, some AL code to run, and it's in the microsecond realm, extremely fast to run the code. But then if it has to reach out and connect to the SQL database, he paints it as an extreme example. It's vastly more expensive and greater than 1 millisecond, sometimes several seconds. And anyone who's done software development understands the cost of hitting the database between connection, caching, query execution, returning the data, etc. So he says the ratio between DB and non-DB AL statements is, I think he meant 10 to 1, but basically it's 10 times more expensive at minimum to hit the database. The NST spends 99% of the time waiting for the database, and I would agree that makes sense. And then they talk about how great the performance of BC is, which on the one hand, I would agree. On the other hand, anyone who's used BC for very long knows that one day BC is flying, is very responsive. The next day, the performance of the UI is just abysmal, and you're like, what is wrong with this? So while I kind of agree with what they're saying here, they may want to try using BC on a day-to-day basis to get the customer's perspective and how horribly slow it can be and unresponsive sometimes. I'm sure it can be rationalized and explained, but saying how fast the NST is and how fast an AL line of code is not the whole picture, right? And this is base BC. So anyway, lots of dimensions on this discussion, but check out this video. This was shared by Natalie, our BC Docs librarian, on Twitter. I was completely unaware of this series, so there's a QR code for this video. You can hop on over to YouTube or just head to YouTube, look up the BC channel. Upcoming events, Proximos Eventos, Directions EMEA is coming up in less than 2 weeks. If you haven't booked your flight to Vienna, get on over there, book it, and go to directionsforpartners.com and register. And we have BC Day Poland 2024, November 21st in Warsaw. And that is free, kind of like a user group meeting is my impression. Dynamics User Group Norway, November 26th and 7th in Oslo, dynug.no. And the BC Day Australia, New Zealand in November 28th, Thanksgiving Day in Sydney, Australia. Go to businesscentralday.co.nz and enjoy that conference. So lots of stuff lined up. And then we have the Summit NA road shows, November, Indianapolis, Houston, December 5th, and then we have January, February listed there. Irvine, Atlanta, Dallas, and Denver. Dynamicscommunities.com Summit-Roadshow. Has anyone gone to one of these? I have not asked anyone about them, but let me know if you have. And Jeremy Visca's version 2, second edition of the BC API reference. That book is available. It's available electronically. Go to sparebrain.com/books, electronically or hard copy. I would go with electronic because then it's just more convenient and you potentially get updates. So check that out. Good book, handy reference. I'm always up for a reference. And not quite sure what I was doing with this slide. You and I are going to find out at the same time. I think I made a mistake here. So I had a fun 5.5 hours and more of calls yesterday, nonstop calls, barely had time for lunch. And that apparently included an hour of Spanish class. And I had a call with a customer. I don't know the story didn't ask, they didn't offer, they hired an internal developer, full-time developer to do their BCAL development. And they, for whatever reason, that person no longer works for them. So they're looking for a replacement. And I thought, good luck with that. That's not quite easy to do, as they are finding out. And I said, well, I want to make sure you have your code, because this person, I don't know how long they worked there. They wrote a lot of code apparently. And I'm like, you make sure you've got everything. And they're like, oh yeah, I've got the files. I'm like, wait, do you use Git or DevOps, GitHub or DevOps? They're like, oh no, we use Visual Studio. I can send you the packages, is what they said. I'm like, whoa, that scared me. Like, not scared me, it scared me for them, because they're the one who has presumably spent tens of thousands of dollars on this development. And as far as I could glean from a few minutes of conversation, they do not have a source control system. They do not have pipelines. They do not have any testing. They do not have next minor, next major, right? Like all of the stuff that I constantly harp on to take care of your code. So this is the unusual situation where the customer took this responsibility on, has the code, but this developer did not apparently inform them, or was unaware, or didn't have any of these practices. So last week I talked about partners who were holding code hostage, holding customers hostage, and would not give them the code. Well, now we have a customer that theoretically has the code, but they're not taking care of it. So it's like, okay, so the question was, what is DevOps? And I'm like, uh-oh, here we go. So, yep, that's the first call, is inventory the extensions and customizations and ISV and everything. Figure out where the code is, find it, and check it in somewhere. Make a backup to the hilt, figure out version numbers, and try and make sense of what's going on. So that is my enviable task this afternoon. Power Automate training call. I'm having regular calls with Ronald, and we are working on learning Power Automate and Flow. And we had a call yesterday where, when we have a release pipeline that drops the app file, the PTE, into Azure Blob Storage, our Flow copies it and pushes it to two SharePoint sites to have it cataloged for our dev side and our consulting side. And so there was a request that in the email notification that goes out, that the subject line have the client and the project name for the PTE. It's like, perfect. So I worked with Ronald to figure that out. And like, I figured it'd be similar to Excel, and it kind of is, but it has some functions that are friendlier than Excel. And then it has this limitation where you cannot perform math on variables in an operation in a flow. You can't say variable plus 1. You can't say variable minus 1. And I'm like, what? You have to use add or subtract or multiply or divide functions on the variables or values in the flow. Like, I don't get it. Whatever. Yeah, Ted says that this customer will be surprised when next major and next minor breaks their system. Exactly. Like, they spent tens of thousands of dollars on this customization, which involves inventory, critical inventory movement throughout their warehouses, multiple facilities, compliance, regulations. Like, it's a really interesting industry. No joke, you do not want to mess around with this customization they did. Super business critical. And imagine that they go to work on a Friday morning and boom, stuff stops working. Because if they're not putting their code in DevOps, I'm going to assume they're not monitoring the upgrade schedule in BC Admin Center for the next minor, next major. And I've heard there are just a few bugs in 25.0. Imagine if they had a breaking change in 25.0 that shuts down their customizations for their warehouse system. No bueno. And like, if you know how the breaking changes go, you may not be able to just fix the issue and redeploy. You might have to do an interim jump to deprecate and obsolete and then have this new version. I don't know on a PT if that limitation exists like AppSource apps. But yeah, bad day. So we did the Power Automate training on string parsing, basically. and doing variables in Power Automate. And Ronald got to learn that. He had a crash course with me. So he's like, okay, slow down. Let me do this again. So he's got to do it 3 or 4 more times to get it, for it to fully sink in, right? But he's making progress there, learning lots of stuff. And what else? The first GP support call I think I had on Monday or whatever, where everything was a mess, misconfigured. I had to have another one because it gets even worse. Somehow, someone magically kind of redirected to some other environment, and I don't know, more misconfiguration. So I had another 30-minute call with the customer to find all of the problems with this misconfiguration of the different installations. Send that to the partner, because I'm doing someone else's job. This isn't my job, to point out all the problems with this server and say, can you guys please clean this up? Like, what is going on? Who is supporting this customer? So it's this weird situation where they have IT and the customer kind of does some of the stuff, and then the partner has to get involved, and therefore no one's responsible. So I had to do an email outlining all the problems with all the configuration issues on this on-prem server, and complete waste of everyone's time because there's zero value in what's going on here. So anyway, yep, my love of on-prem continues. Let's see. Oh, I think I skipped this on the first one. So I was asked to help some partner. I don't know who they are. Alyssa's like, can you just take care of this, Steve? This is more your thing. Fine. I have a call with someone. No idea who they are, what they want, why I'm talking to them. But apparently we help them. So my partner, Tanya, has test team. She and Alyssa help partners, and we supplement those partners with Business Central services. And I get involved when it involves development or technical stuff, and we involve the Blue Dragonfly team. So we work together to supplement partners. Some of those partners apparently sell BC projects, but we fully implement them. So we're like, fine, we'll do the entire project for you, turnkey, and we support those partners. Occasionally, those partners have questions, and we help them out with that. This is one of those partners who apparently knows nothing about BC, and I was helping one of their consultants try to log into a demo environment. And it was interesting because the first 10 minutes were trying to get the partner to figure out how to use Teams and share their screen. I kid you not. So I'm not quite sure how this partner functions like that, but it was fascinating. Somehow the consultant had figured out CDX. I don't know how they got to CDX. Someone had pointed them to it. They created a CDX environment for Microsoft 365 Enterprise. And I'm like, what is Microsoft 365 Enterprise? I don't even know what that name means these days with Microsoft's word salad of products. So it turns out that the CDX environment for M365 Enterprise is just the Office apps, as far as I could tell. Like the entire laundry list of all the weird Office apps that you never use, Viva, blah, blah, blah. You know, Office, SharePoint, Outlook, whatever, OneDrive, but then all these other obscure things that you've never heard of. Fine. Turns out that does not include Business Central. There's a completely separate CDX environment for Business Central, which clearly says Microsoft 365 Business Central. This person did not bother to scroll down the list and just chose something that seemed reasonable. Well, so he's got to delete that CDX environment. He's got to recreate the Business Central CDX environment. And we go to log in to Business Central with the credentials. It logs in successfully, gets to Business Central, and says, you're not licensed. So I'm like, sorry, man, we don't use CDX for this along with 10 other reasons. So I can't help you from this point. Knock yourself out if you want to try to get this support for CDX and try to figure out why you don't have a Business Central license in a CDX demo environment. Makes no sense whatsoever. So I told him what I do, and that's the Eric Hogard approach, which I'll talk about in a second. But like, I've heard of people using CDX for Business Central. Apparently it works despite its massive annoyances of the 90-day expiration and the hassle of maintaining it and whatever else. But The CDX Business Central environment, if you try to log into BC right after it's done, there is no Business Central license. So I don't know if there's a way to go into the M365 Admin Center and fix that or not, but I was like, I'm out. Like, you need to learn how to support yourself here, folks. So anyway, that was an educational experience. And speaking of BC demo environments, so here are the options I'm aware of. There are probably others, but you can purchase a BC subscription. If you're a partner or customer, just make up a name. Do not use your real domain. Do not use your real business, because then you'll just be railroaded on that account. Make a fake company, make a new domain, make a new email, whatever, and then purchase one user of BC, and you'll get support and all this stuff in theory. $70 per user per month. That's one option. I've never done it, but you could theoretically. You could try to use the infamous Customer Digital Experiences, CDX, create an environment, and good luck with that, folks. Pavlo says CDX is Data Lake, Dataverse. No, actually. CDX, my understanding, is the entire demo ecosystem of Microsoft. I'm assuming for partners, but I don't know if anyone else can use it. And if you go into CDX, there's like this laundry list, this huge menu of options depending on what you want to do. So there was M365 Enterprise, there's Business Central, there's F&O, there's probably Power Platform, there's probably Data Lake, Dataverse, probably Azure. There's all the different product offerings. And you have to choose that menu item, and then it spools up a CDX environment for that set of products and demos and data sets and all that stuff. So it's this monstrosity. And yeah, so you could use this CDX, and I don't know if partners get it automatically. I've never bothered to look into it. You could try to use that. Good luck with that and its limitations and challenges. Or you could use the Eric Hogard method, which is what I do. Eric Hogard previously had a hack to get free BC demo environment. That dark alley got shut down by the authorities, and Eric found this new workaround, which is to buy one Microsoft 365 Business Basic subscription, $6 a month prepaid, or $72 a year if you go an annual, or it's like $7.20 per month if you want to go monthly. And this gets you basically one Microsoft 365 Outlook mail account, or whatever it's called these days. So one email account, it gives you access to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, where you can set up additional users unlicensed in the M365 world, but it gives you a BC demo environment, a demo tenant, and you can create virtually unlimited users for your org and give them BC information worker licenses. Up to 10,000 BC users is what it says. So for $72 a year, I have multiple BC demo environments. So I have one for Berlin for the ERP Center of Excellence. I have one for my personal demos. And then if anyone wants one, I spoke with a customer at Summit. They're like, yeah, we want to test BC. I'm like, do this. It doesn't expire. Just don't start the trial or whatever. And you have a demo BC environment with production, 3 sandboxes, as many users as you want. Fantastic. So that's my recommendation. Go check out Eric's video. Get 3 BC Cloud sandboxes for $6 per month at youtube.com. Search for Eric Hogard. Cyber insecurity. I used to call it cybersecurity. It's just cyber insecurity. This is far more appropriate. When I selected my firewall, I didn't do some exhaustive process. I just, for whatever reason, I chose SonicWall because I had a SonicWall VPN appliance. Yes, Pavlo says the license is named something as Business Central for IWs. That is correct. If you go into M365 Admin Center, you try to assign licenses, you'll see Business Central for IWs. I believe that means for information workers. No idea why they called it that, but as far as I could tell, it's a demo user license. So you just assign that license to your M365 user. You're good to go. You can log in. You need to sync within Business Central. So you go to BC Users, click Sync with M365, and you are good to go. So on the cyber insecurity front, I bought my SonicWall firewall, and then I met a friend who manages an enterprise network for a large institution. And he says, oh, SonicWall sucks. We went with Fortinet because it's so much better. We have our laundry list and our business requirements, and how good is Fortinet and how bad is SonicWall? Tell me more about how good Fortinet is. Folks, never brag about how good your security appliances are, your security software. I'm sorry, it's just begging for a black eye. So this is yet another Fortinet zero-day flaw. They have been beat up over the last several months, multiple zero-day and other vulnerabilities in their appliances and software, their VPN, their gateway, and I don't even know what device this is. And it has been actively exploited since June. They notified customers privately about this flaw, and apparently they now have some mitigation. I don't know if they have a fix for it yet. So zero-day attacks, over 50 servers have been confirmed to have been compromised since June. And it is in the FortiManager, whatever that is, management protocol that is publicly exposed to the internet to allow for convenient management of these edge devices. And once the device is connected, even if it was unauthorized, they could exploit the flaw to execute API commands on this exposed device and steal configuration data and compromise it. So, Fortinet has released patches for this CVE, offered mitigation such as only allowing specific IP addresses to connect or preventing unknown FortiGate devices from registering. I do not brag about my security appliances because they have had 0 days. I have seen the attackers banging against my interfaces, and I know I am just one split second away from having a network compromise should my devices have an issue. So yeah, that is the state of cyber insecurity. And Friday, Viernes, welcome, good morning, buenos dias. I am a few minutes away from a call with the ERP Center of Excellence team in Berlin. I'm doing the live stream. Good morning, welcome everyone, thanks for joining. And then we have our usual BC customer call. I am wondering when that will wind down, but we still are wrapping up a few things, doing some integrations, customizations, and phase 2 stuff. And one of the things that was a last-minute addition, I was talking about that customer who hired a developer to have their customization done. They claim they have the source code, but as far as I can tell, they have no source code management or DevOps or anything. And so on Twitter, Ted and I were discussing, well, what do we do? Do we implement Azure DevOps in their tenant, or do we put the code in our tenant? And honestly, I'd be fine with the customer managing the DevOps, but we use Cosmo Alpaca, which is a massive time savings. And I am not about to go into the customer's DevOps, set up a repo from scratch, set up the structure, set up the pipelines. Like, it takes hours. It's a pain in the butt. As far as I know, my developers handled it, thankfully. But we use Cosmo Alpaca. That's 2 clicks and boom, everything is scaffolded, everything is set up, everything is ready to go. But we'd have to migrate the code into that folder structure, rename, set up the YAML pipelines, all this stuff. So there's work either way, but I don't want to deal with a DevOps repo or a DevOps environment without Cosmo Alpaca. So interesting question that Ted asks is, would Cosmo Alpaca support pushing code to GitHub or DevOps repo? Very interesting, great question, right? Imagine you've got a customer who has no source code management or doesn't have good practices. Could it point to BC if source is available, suck out the code from those PTEs and push them to the DevOps repository? Like, awesome feature, right? Like, imagine the rescue coming in with your cape and saying, oh, no worries, I got Cosmo Alpaca. You click a couple buttons, it sucks the code out, extracts it, pushes it over to the repo. I'm guessing that's not practical, not because of the technical aspect of connecting those things, but because Cosmo Alpaca would be like, what is this mess? This code is disorganized. How do I put it into a structure that works for this DevOps or GitHub repo. I'm guessing that's going to be where the breakdown is, but great idea. Maybe at a minimum, just the extraction step that it sucks down the code to a VS Code project, and you can then start to clean it up. I'm gonna ping Patrick and Marcus at Cosmo to see if this is an option, because I'm literally dealing with this. The customer wants a call today to start seeing if they have all their code. So yeah. Okay. That's Friday. And excellence update in the ERP Center of Excellence. The BC training is underway, and I am like a proud dad. Look at this. This is David and Jocelyn. Don't have photos of Jocelyn because she was behind the camera. This is the Career Center in Berlin, El Salvador. This is an office we set up in a town of 18,000 people where cows are literally walking down the street. You got goats, cows, chickens, horses, dogs, you name it, various wildlife. Little office in the community center in the back. That is David up front in the red logo shirt for the ERP Center of Excellence, training 3 other Berliners on Business Central. So Jocelyn and David have started the training this week, 3 days a week part-time, and they're teaching Business Central. And if you look closely, that laptop screen you see, that has Central Q on it. So cheers, Dimitri. Thank you for Central Q. So they're learning about master records, customers, vendors, items, warehouses, inventory. And then I'm not sure what they're going to move on to next, because David and Jocelyn are building the curriculum themselves. I'm offering support, but they haven't had any questions. They're like, no, we got this, Steve, back away. You were a terrible teacher. We're going to do a much better job. Literally, they provide good, honest feedback. So they're saying, no, our training is much better, Steve. Step aside. We do not need your help. So that's awesome. I'm thrilled they don't need me. And so that's the second day of training. That's David helping Franklin, and that is Miguel on the left. So that training is underway. And the number one request they had is, Steve, we need coffee in the Career Center. So I am fairly well connected now in El Salvador. It's kind of nice. I made a phone call to Gabe at the Good Beans El Salvador. Said, Gabe, hook me up with coffee. We don't have a grinder in the Career Center, so we're just going to go with ground coffee. I know it's a tragedy, but it's practical. So he ground 3 bags of Toragos and had it couriered out to Berlin. Next day delivery to Jocelyn. And then Jocelyn ordered a coffee maker from Simon. We got this Hamilton Beach, I guess. Pretty fancy coffee maker by Salvadoran standards with the carafe. And yeah, we even got logo coffee mugs. There we are. We are fueled by Salvadoran coffee. And yeah, Pavlo says they definitely know what training could be better because they already went that way. Exactly. It was the first time I had trained people on Business Central, and I'm told I did a terrible job, but somehow they miraculously survived and have their battle scars from Steve's training. So they're like, no, we're going to do this better. It is fresh in their minds what it is like to learn Business Central from scratch. They're like, this is how we wanted to learn. So this is how we want to teach. So it is fantastic. So I was like, I'll step back. You want coffee? Let me take care of the coffee part. So I got them some artisanal premium Salvadoran coffee, Toragos blend, and they are fueled with ERP Center of Excellence custom mugs. So excellent. I am just super happy. We are now going to have 5 people in Berlin, El Salvador, trained in English in Business Central, and they will be offering bilingual training in El Salvador to anyone in Latin America or North America for that matter, if someone wants to fly down there. So once they get and do the English training several times, get that under their belt, they're going to rewrite all the training materials in Spanish and start offering the Business Central training to customers and partners throughout Latin America. Ideally in-person training, so people will fly to El Salvador, come out to Berlin, stay at a nice accommodations, and walk down to the Career Center and have some great training in person with 2 to 5 people who will now be trained in Business Central, Power Automate, you name it, AL development. So we are building, folks. It is happening. And the deep thought of the week. I had a conversation with a very intelligent, successful business person, and they said, Steve, is it A or B? Are you on this side of the conversation or are you on this side of the conversation? And I thought, you have got to be kidding me. This is a very smart, successful, intelligent person, and they are only aware of two options in this topic. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. Like, they studied this and they learned about this and they said, well, is it A or B? Come on, Steve, you got to choose. And I said, I reject your question. It's a false choice. Because they studied along a particular realm and they used the typical study materials and they learned about this topic. And this topic predominantly talks about option A or B. Like, imagine if I went to a customer and says, well, sorry, customer, there's only two choices. There's QuickBooks and then there's SAP. Which do you want? QuickBooks, SAP, you got to choose. That's the equivalent of this discussion. QuickBooks or SAP? Like, no, I reject those choices completely. So you have to step back and realize you were studying someone else's story. Like, this isn't reality. This was someone who told you there are only two options, QuickBooks or SAP. It's preposterous, right? So I don't know if this is a great analogy, but I offered them Plato's allegory of the cave, that they went down this path of studying and believing they were educating themselves. All they were doing is chaining themselves in the cave. And if you're not familiar with Plato's allegory of the cave, Pavlo, thank you. You're a great way to go. One day there will be a whole city full of Microsoft Dynamics specialists. Exactly. It is the most unlikely scenario imaginable. Small town of 18,000 people in El Salvador. The average income, which I believe is overstated, is $360 a month. That is the average income. And I believe in reality it is much lower because people subsist selling goods or whatever on the street, and it's unreported income. So I believe the income is much lower than that. So we are bringing career skills, long-term, multi-year, multi-decade career skills to Berlin, El Salvador. They are training in English and in Spanish. They have bilingual skills that I don't have, and they'll be able to serve all of North America and Latin America and elevate the skill sets of the Business Central partners in the entire Latin American region. So it's going to be awesome. Unbelievable how it's worked out. I'm very thankful. Back to Plato's Cave. So I found two videos that were helpful. One is this TED Ed from 9 years ago, Plato's Allegory of the Cave by Alex Gendler. And then I found this fascinating, excellent video by Hillsdale College, Plato's Allegory of the Cave by a philosophy professor there. Really fantastic video, and it has me go and sign up for one of their courses as a result. Check out these two videos, and super deep. And so the professor asks a question, who are the image makers? And this is truly profound. Once you understand Plato's allegory of the cave, and then understand that they're the people viewing the shadows on the wall, those shadows are created by the image makers. So if you look at this, there are many examples of this image of the cave. You have the people chained in the cave seeing only the shadows. Well, then they get taken up one level to where the image makers are. And then they're like, oh my gosh, that's what's making the image. I now see reality. I see that these people were walking by creating shadows on the wall. This is reality. And if you want your mind to be blown, they then climb out of the cave. They then see sunlight. They see the actual objects and shadows cast by the sun. And then they think, oh, wow, this is reality. But think about it one step further. The sun is just a source of light that is producing reflections and shadows on the surface. What if that is just one more level of the cave? Like, the mind boggles. So You've got the prisoners in the cave. You've got the image makers. And then you come out and you think you are free. You think you see reality. But really, it's just the sun creating different shadows rather than the fires in the cave. That is your deep thought of the week. Highly recommend checking out these videos on Plato's Cave and others. It's a fascinating allegory about how you accept narratives throughout the world, whether it's learning or discussions or philosophy or whatever. Pavlos says we're in the matrix, right? Like essentially we are. So my highly intelligent friend said A or B, QuickBooks or SAP. It's like, whoa, slow down there. You realize there are an infinite number of options in any direction. And so like, don't accept the narrative of A or B. Anyone ever asked you that question? Well, is it A or B? It's like, where'd you get your information? I reject the premise, right? So, okay. So based on that Plato's Cave video from Hillsdale College, I went over and this video was essentially a teaser video to direct you to their Introduction to Western Philosophy class. So 14 lessons, 7.5 hours. So I've signed up for that. It's a free course. And they ask for donations to support their college. But I've signed up for it and I hope to be able to watch the videos because the professor was fantastic. He did a great job explaining the Plato's Cave allegory. So it was a lot of fun, really random journey. Yes, infinite regression. Absolutely. And if you're not questioning from step one, it's like, whoa, how many layers are you missing in this? Like, well, should I implement Business Central or NetSuite? Like, why are those your only two options? Like, step back. Like, don't accept the FUD, the hype, the marketing, the fake sales stories. Just reject the premise and start learning on your own and like, don't accept, like Kobayashi Maru. Oh, it is an unwinnable situation. I don't accept. I'm sorry. Like, I will not accept that scenario. Okay, my Q&A for the week to you. I am late for my call. I have asked this question before. I don't remember the answer. Someone rationalized it. Still didn't make any sense to me. It's kind of just like, whatever. Why can purchase orders be posted in Business Central? Like, what is the reason for this? In Dynamics GP, we had purchase orders. They were not posted documents. They didn't have a financial impact. They were not posted. They just had items that went to a vendor, said, we want to order this. You could receive against purchase orders and you post the receipts. That's fine. Then you had invoices. You could receive an invoice in the same step. That makes sense to me. But in Business Central, you are given the option to post a purchase order. Like, what? Why would you post a purchase order? If you try to post a purchase order, you are asked for the vendor invoice number. I'm entering a purchase order. How could I possibly have the vendor invoice number? I haven't received the goods and I haven't been invoiced by the vendor. Like, why would you go to the trouble of creating a purchase order if you already have the invoice number? Like, wouldn't you just do a purchase receipt or receipt invoice combination? Maybe Business Central doesn't know that. I'm naive. I don't know the answer to these things. And so then why not use a purchase invoice? These are questions I have. So I had a call with Jocelyn discussing this, and I'm like, hey, if I'm the purchasing department and I place a purchase order and it goes to Office Depot for laptops and they ship it, we receive it, then I expect to get an invoice. I don't expect to enter a purchase order with a purchase invoice number and post it. Like, what is that about? What business process is it that has a customer entering a PO, entering a vendor invoice number, and hitting post? Like, all in one. Like, why bother with the PO? I could see entering a purchase invoice or a purchase receipt invoice or some combination thereof where you have an invoice number. Got it. I get that. But why bother with the PO? What is it about BC? I don't know. Like, help me out here. It makes no sense for purchase invoice to be a mandatory field on a PO. So that is my question to y'all. And second fun one, holy bananas. Try printing a customer statement in Business Central. Just give it a try. Just look at the options that appear on that report options dialog. If you don't have questions, you've been doing this for a long time. And if you actually understand what every one of those report options truly means and the consequence of every one, I'm skeptical about such claims, unless that's your job to train people and you just happen to actually have researched and know them. And the reason is, if you aren't careful and you print a customer statement, you will get a statement that has a total of one amount and your aging summary does not match. Like, what? So it is tricky. And Tanya's like, oh, you just print the statement. And I said, Tanya, wait a minute. What does this option mean? She said, oh, I don't know. What does that option mean? Oh, I don't know. I just always run it and it works. I'm like, no, it doesn't. So what's happening is the ERP Center of Excellence interns are doing these report layouts. They're looking carefully at the results in every option, and they're finding every detail, and they're asking me these questions. And my answer is always, I don't know. And we have to figure these things out. And it is super unintuitive. So anyway, that's my question of the week. So with that, folks, have a good week. Go learn something. I'm about to embark on like 4 hours of calls. So like spill some coffee for me. And have a great weekend. Something fin de semana. Okay. Adios, nos vemos, and que la vaya bien, as they say. Talk to you later. What button do I press? Okay. Adios.